How's my makeup?
We're in a very, very comfortable place in Comfort Inn in Plattsburgh on a cool and snowy day in January 2003. I don't know how we all got together in this room. This should be called the Inner Sanctum because we've done some pretty fantastic television shows right here, Calvin and myself, interviewing people who were involved in all walks of life, including sports and so on. But today, we've got the artists together, the artistes together. On my right, Mr. Sid Couchey, well known to North Country fans and comic book lovers for the last 227 years.
28.
28 years. The first thing he said to Ruth was when we started the show, is my makeup on straight? You know, she straightened all the hairs out on his head, so everything is absolutely perfect. Both of them. I got mine straight. And on my left, and your right, is my good friend Arto Monaco. And both of these guys have been the subject of a number of programs for our little corner. To the point where they should be, well, you already got a Hall of Fame. You don't need another one, do you?
Well, I'm anticipating it. The Western Grade B Movie Villains Hall of Fame.
I like that. I like that one. You people who watch this program on a regular basis kind of have an inkling of why we gathered these people together. And by the way, Ruth is here for moral and various other kinds of support, because we got three old codgers over here, and the moral part might need to be upheld before we get through here today. But we've had an awful lot of fun with these people, and our viewers know that there's something in the wind. And the big wind was started by Calvin Castine, who's got the camera on his shoulder, and it's in the form of a comic book. By way of a little background, our cameras have gone to Port Henry, to Witherby, and to various points in that neck of the woods to talk about mining on more than one occasion. But we also went to a home in Witherby and looked up at it, and we were pretty sure when we pointed at it that that was the home of the great movie star Tom Tyler, whose name was Vincent Markovsky. I have to ask him every single time because I can't remember his name. But he grew up in that mining community, went on to gain some fame and fortune in B movies and even a few A movies and serials and things till the 1950s when he met an ignominious death, just a shadow of his former wonderful strength that he has as a young man. So Calvin's going to explain later how this idea progressed, but suffice it to say that next year will have been this year 2003, now that we're past the new year. It will be the 100th anniversary of his birth. You know the exact date, probably. August 9th. Look at this, August 9th. So the idea Calvin got was to write a comic book story, which he did, and list the services of our two favorite artists and interesting people in the North Country to draw this comic book. Arto has drawn the cover. Sid is on the inside, here on the inside. He's done the inside, and Calvin told me before we started the camera, he's already got a chapter 2 figured out in his mind. He's in the book, and I heard that I'm in the book.
Has he got some artists lined up?
I think maybe he's got him on the string here today. He's probably got attachments underneath the table. But we're here to talk about how this idea progressed. And if you've ever seen any interviews with these two fellas and myself, you know that we might digress. One of our favorite trips is to digress USA, right?
Not only that, we might even get off the subject.
And we might follow a few tangents before we get through here today. I must say that in all the several hundred television programs I've done with this guy who's holding the camera, Calvin Castine, the ones involving you two guys and a few choice others are right at the top of the list. You both have had such tremendously interesting lives. You've chosen to stay here in the North Country for an awful lot of reasons, and you have so much to offer. I suppose when we're young kids, we like to think about a legacy, and
Well, I'm just trying to, are you saying that our programs are good or the others were lousy?
So we have, I don't know if we've really done any real chickens in the past. We try to wring the best out of every person we interview and every story we tell. But some people are just good storytellers, and you guys are great storytellers. And some of the golden moments in my professional life have been with you guys. I mean, you with that in the first pitch Hall of Fame and going to Montreal, a golden moment, again orchestrated by our friend Calvin Castine. Everywhere I go, people call me and say, I got a call yesterday, as a matter of fact, Arto, and they said, wait a minute, does Arto know so-and-so, and I knew Arto way back when, and we were looking at one of your pictures. I didn't even tell Calvin this, and she said, all of a sudden I'm watching, Land of Make-Believe. All of a sudden, there was my father in that old film. My father was on there, and I called Arto, and isn't that fantastic? Yeah. When a person who's now, I have no idea how old she must be, maybe in her 40s or 50s, and she said, 50s. That was my father.
Yeah.
And she saw that over again, and she's going to call Calvin and order 200 copies of every program we've ever done with you, and everybody is happy. It's fun to do this kind of show, and it's fun to sit here today and talk about Tom Tyler tales and all the rest of it. We're going to put this whole story together, and you, if you stay by your television set, can be part of it right here on Hometown Cable. Any idea what's been happening while the camera was shut off and Calvin was checking the tape? I'll tell you, of course we have a staff of thousands. They're very little people and almost invisible. But when the tape stops, they all run up and straighten us out and make sure you're straight. It's impossible if my wife is watching to get a good angle on me. She says, why can't Calvin get a good angle? I said, with me, honey, there aren't any good angles left. Well, there's no angles. It's all well-rounded.
From the back.
From the back is the best, yeah. Shall we show the cover? I think we ought to show the cover. Can you lift that up? And you didn't have to rip the page right off it.
I just ripped the back off.
My goodness. How did this develop, this cover? How did you get an idea for what you wanted to put on there?
Well, Kelvin came in and asked me if I'd do the cover, and I said, yes, I would. I'd be delighted to do it because Sid was going to do the inside. And I think a lot of Sid Couchey in his work. And so I said, what do you want on it? And he said, well, I don't know. And he had a real rough sketch made and of the cowboy. And he said, put a cowboy in the front, Tom Tyler, and anything you want on the back. And it, as quick as that, just developed quickly. He really told me what he'd like on it.
That's so cool. I see you got B. Denton on there.
Yeah.
You know where that comes from. In the Express and the Stagecoach and the... Oh, my goodness.
And the old lady, she's scurrying away because she knows there's going to be trouble there, and she's leaving. And there's actually no one getting killed. No bloodshed. But it's some good standoffs.
Oh, there's always... That's what life is all about, isn't it?
It is.
Some good standoffs? Yeah. I love it. And on the inside, tell us how yours progressed and how that started. You want to hold something? Well, you got a large version of every page? Mm-hmm. All right, talk about it.
Well, now that I can't see it, no, wait a minute, I'll take this.
Okay. He's got the smaller version of it.
Well, here again, Colorado Cal approached me and came up with these 9 pages of script and asked me if I would do them. I said no. But,
don't make me laugh. I'm shaking the card here.
Well, anyway, no, we finally came to some agreement when, and I thought it was a pretty funny premise. Anyway, it starts out with the first. I thought this was it, but apparently this is Tom Tyler and the Three Saddlemates is just the first story. And do you want me to just read the script? Or anyway, Tom starts with his heading out west and running into a town in Baxter Springs, Kansas. This will make more sense when I presume that Cal is going to tell about this town out in Baxter Springs having the same demographics as Port Henry or this area.
I'm sure. Hey, hold on a second. We'll stop a sec. Yeah, we got a lot of ground to cover today. We just stopped because we're going to get back into the actual panels in this comic book in a few minutes. Calvin suggested it might be a good idea for the people who are seeing the three of us for the first time. What a shock that must have been to somebody's system to walk into a living room and say, what are those guys talking about? Well, some people might not know about Tom Tyler. Calvin is a cowboy fan. We're going to talk about cowboy stars and people who've lived in the North Country, who've been involved in movies over the years, and there have been quite a few famous people. But I want to read just a little bit of background of Tom Tyler before we get started so you'll have an idea where we're going with this whole comic book idea. Western movies flourished for the first half of the 20th century, and maybe nobody's life better parallels the genre than that of the man who became known as Tom Tyler, destined to become one of the most prolific B-Western movie stars of the 1930s. Vincent Markowski, I gotta remember that name. Vincent Markowski was born into a town of Moriah mining family on August 9th, 1903, the son of Frank and Helen Markowski. The birthplace is generally listed as being in Port Henry, New York, but one would have to believe that back in 1903, there's a strong possibility that the birth actually took place at the Markowski home in Witherby, the one that we've shown on previous programs. Although listed on the Witherby, Sherman, and Republic Steel Corporation records as being of Polish descent, the family is actually Lithuanian, according to Vincent's nephew, Mike Tyler. The Markowski family included 5 children. The exact date that the family left the Moriah area to settle in the Detroit suburb of Hamtramck, is it? Oh, I got it right. Hamtramck, Michigan, is not really known, but evidence would indicate that to be about 1918. The Witherby, Sherman, and Republic Steel Corporation records of Essex County show that Frank Marco Jr., 16, Polish laborer at 3 Mills, started work on June 25th, 1917, and left on September 11th. There's that date again, on 1918. And Port Henry historian Joan Davy was unable to find the work dates for Frank Sr. Many of the records have been lost in fires over the years. But the year 1918 would put Vincent at roughly age 15. At a later date, he and his childhood friend, Emil Karkowski, whose family also had migrated to the Hamtramck area, headed for Hollywood. When their money ran short, Emil headed back home. Vincent ventured on. B-Western historian Buck Rainey put Vincent's arrival in Hollywood as late 1923. That's even before you got there.
Right.
What year did you go?
You mean where they
Hollywood.
made the movies?
Yeah.
Oh, no, that was 1937.
Yeah, see, that was the year I was born. See, we got to get all these things. A muscular young man. We're talking about Vincent now.
Yeah.
Muscular young man with weightlifter proportions. He quickly found work in the movies as a prop man and an extra. His first credited roles were in 1924. Started work as Vincent Markowski, used the name Bill Burns on at least one occasion. That's a new one on me. Finally settled on the Tom Tyler moniker sometime in 1925. Unlike some of the cowboys who were to come along later, Tom Tyler looked like somebody who could handle himself against the most rugged of opponents. He was over 6 feet tall, carried just under 200 pounds on his muscular frame. There was a book in 1987 titled Heroes of the Range, and Rainey in that book stated that Tyler created a new world's amateur record in the right-handed clean and jerk lift of 213 pounds. With one hand. Isn't that amazing? And in 1928, set a new world's record in weightlifting in the heavyweight class when he lifted 760 pounds.
I never knew that about it.
That's consider my weight plus one of these other guys. We're just about 760. Anyway, the record stood for 14 years. Tom Tyler's lifetime barely spanned 50 years. From that date in August 03 until 5/1/54, but in those 5 decades, it coincided with the heyday of the cowboy movies. The Great Train Robbery, 1903, the first Western picture that we've all heard so much about, Two Guns and a Badge, 1954, starring Wayne Morris, considered by many film historians to be the last of the great Series B Westerns. And Tyler's career, as some of our viewers already know, ran the gamut. In Westerns, he was a hero, he was a villain. In a few movies, he was an Indian. He started his career as an extra, became a star before there were even sounds hooked onto those movies. Had a successful string of B-Western starring roles. He worked briefly in a traveling circus, was part of the most famous of all the cowboy trios, the Three Musketeers, right? And he was the star of some of the best-known chapter serials of the 30s and 40s, played character roles, bit parts in some of Hollywood's most celebrated films, including Gone with the Wind, Stagecoach, and Grapes of Wrath, Drums Along the Mohawk. He ended his career playing minor roles on television. About the only thing he didn't do in Western movies was sing. I've never done that either of you. Did lip sync with a few numbers in a couple of films in the mid-30s. Never made very big money. So often associated with Hollywood stars today. He had a very interesting career. Appeared in at least 3 movies with the famed actress Jean Arthur, who we've mentioned many times, who was born near Tyler's hometown right here in Plattsburgh. On October 17th, 1900, they starred together in a couple of silent westerns in 1926, Born to Battle and Cowboy Cop. And later in 1942, Tyler played a heavy in a movie called The Talk of the Town with Cary Grant, Jean Arthur, Ronald Colman, just to drop a few names. This time, Ms. Arthur was one of Hollywood's top leading ladies. Tyler was splitting his time between playing these character roles in major films and starring as Stony Brook in the Three Musketeers series.
Jean Arthur, by the way, was known for her very distinctive voice, very cute voice.
Did she really?
Yeah, she had a very interesting voice.
Yeah.
You could, today if you just listening to the program, you immediately, she comes on, you can tell it's her.
You see, not having seen enough of her movies to remember that, I don't remember that voice offhand.
Oh, so you're younger than we are, but
Just about.
But that's what you get for being young.
Yeah, I know.
Everybody's seen Shane, and they've seen her.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's
she-
true
oh,
too.
she's
Yes.
great.
Oh, yeah.
Shane was a great picture.
Oh, yeah. In addition to Arthur, Grant, and Coleman, other major stars that Tyler appeared with in various movies over the years include John Wayne, Henry Fonda, Claudette Colbert, Clark Gable, Vivian Lee, Leslie Howard. The list goes on and on and on. Walter Brennan, George Gabby Hayes, and about 20 more in the middle. Unbelievable. Calvin says there's a good website that he told me about way back when with Chuck Anderson, right? Called the Old Corral website, www.surfnetinc.com/Chuck/Tyler.htm, if you want to look for it. And at different times we've mentioned a number of his contributions, the movies, and 7 serials, right? Seven serials. The Phantom, which is familiar to all of us.
All right.
The Adventures of Captain Marvel.
Yes, we know Captain Marvel.
A Phantom of the Air, Clancy of the Mounted, Jungle Mystery, Battling with Buffalo Bill. Come on, you gotta be kidding.
Yeah.
And The Phantom of the West. Oh my goodness. He was in Ben-Hur, the 1925 version of Ben-Hur. And he was on television too. His career, like Calvin said, he ran the gamut. He ended up being on the Gene Autry Show, The Adventures of Wild Bill Hickok, the Cisco Kid.
Yes, I remember
Even
that.
Ruthie, who's the youngest person in the room, remember.
Cisco Kid, we all know that.
Oh, and the Lone Ranger. Oh my goodness, he played Garth in an episode in 1949 in
Well,
The
he was
Lone
in
Ranger.
hundreds of pictures I didn't even know about.
Yeah, many, many, many pictures. We have quite a few photographs here. We've got a lot of things to talk about today. So let us continue. Just do you want to talk about the comic book now? We're going to take one of those little by roads that we talked about early in the show and talk about theme parks because these two guys have been so closely associated with them. It was a long time before I mentioned to Arto Monaco that I worked at a place called Adventure Town up in the Thousand Islands, and he smiled and he said, "Yeah, I designed that place." And I said, "What? What?" And when I left that day, I had what would be the forerunner of a bumper sticker. In those days, they didn't have things that stuck to your bumper, but they had huge cardboard things with wires on each end, and they'd wire it onto your bumper when you were in there, and you'd drive off not knowing that you were going to advertise that place for the next 6 months before you... You had one of those, and you gave it to me, and I love it. Calvin has found me an ashtray, which he gave me. He found me some copies of postcards, and he found me, this would be a very large postcard, right, Calvin?
I blew it up a little bit, so it's
Oh.
not just standard postcard size.
Standard postcard size off the internet. This is available on eBay, and you made a copy of it and blew it up and brought it here today. And boy, oh boy, does this bring back memories, because this is the rodeo. You know, when you had a theme park like that, you had a rodeo, and you had some very interesting guys. I got to meet some of the real old rodeo stars, some of the guys who just didn't feel like making the big trips or all the rodeo circles, so they worked in these little theme parks, and they were bullwhip artists, and they did a lot of neat stuff. And so that was neat. We've showed this picture before. A bit of nostalgia for me. I don't like to look at it too long because when you realize where you've been and you look in the mirror, my mirrors work very well at home these days. I say, whoa.
What happened?
What happened somewhere along the line? But that's a long time ago. How did you get involved with Adventure Town?
Well, I had already done North Pole and Old McDonald's Farm and had started my own park. And just out of the blue came two men one day, George Clark and I forget the other fellow's name, and asked me if I'd design a park for them. And I said, yes, I would, because I was interested in making all the money I could to pay for my own place. So,
The mother of necessity.
yeah. So I designed the park for them, and it was pretty much like Land of Make-Believe. Matter of fact, I've done a lot of Western parks, and they all sort of look alike. You know, you change the saloon over where the church is and the church back. Make a few changes, but they're pretty much all
This one was a real good one,
But
because I spent some really intense time there.
Adventure Town was a real good park, and I'll tell you, they had some real nice props there. I think they got, I know they did, they got this, the big stagecoach from a place over in New Hampshire. And George told me they were just driving along the road one day and asking the different farms, you know, anywhere places we might have a stagecoach? And he said, yeah, down the road here there's a couple of old ladies who got one in the barn. So he said they went down and they looked in that barn, and here's this beautiful, beautiful Concord coach.
Oh,
you know,
my.
and nothing wrong with it, no marks or anything on it. And so they asked the lady, you know, would you be interested in selling it? He said, well, we're getting along in years, and if you promise to take good care of it, we'll sell it to you. So they immediately laid the money out in their hand and sent a truck over there and picked it up. And it is a beautiful coach, and I'm almost positive that's the big coach at Blue Mountain Lake
And
now.
I have to tell you, see, I didn't know that he promised to take good care of it, because I didn't necessarily take very good care of it. I mean,
you probably
we
abused it.
they had some beautiful horses.
Yeah.
And that stagecoach was pulled by beautiful horses. It just didn't sit there and have people look at
No.
it. It was the way the park opened every single day. Before those doors open, there's hundreds of kids waiting at the gate,
Right.
and all of a sudden, guns, fire, and sounds, and we were on the stagecoach up in the woods, and we came flying out of the woods, and they did not baby that coach. And this guy was working on those horses, and they were in a lather by the time they got in front of that gate, and the little kids with their eyes open, and we were firing shotgun boxes and boxes of shotgun blanks. I told on this program I almost burned a guy off his horse The first day I did it because I didn't realize you can't point a shotgun right at somebody within a few feet when you're shooting blanks because it shoots fire. He threatened to do nasty, nasty things to me, this old cowboy. So I learned real fast. But I rode that stagecoach every day, and I have to tell you, it was a wonderful, a wonderful experience.
They also had a wonderful train there that belonged to Henry Ford's grandkids.
Oh, boy, this was...
Henry Ford was a kind of a taskmaster, I guess. Unfortunately, I never met him. But he built a whole farm. And he had all the machinery, the mowing machines and the hay rack and little silos, everything down the scale, for pony scale. And the kids during the summer, he'd make them go out there and farm it and get it ready for winter.
You told me
And
that
then
once. That's so
They
neat.
decided they ought to have a railroad. And I don't know if he had the railroad built or if he bought one and they remodified it. But it was a beautiful little train. You remember the train.
Listen, this picture was taken right on the car. You can see I don't know who built the cars.
That was one of the nicest small engines. I think it was narrow gauge, 3 foot,
And
that I've ever seen.
Those engineers were old Grand Central retired engineers who ran the train just as lovingly as if you had an antique car and you took care of it. And every day they would polish it up.
You see what
They would
happened,
clean the
Gordon?
boiler out.
Gordon, most of these parks, at least the ones I designed, I couldn't design a park today because the law would be after me and the architectural engineers and everybody else. But in the old days, you could just design a park from artist sketches, and you'd turn it over to a carpenter or engineer or somebody, and they'd build it. You didn't have to go through any. I can remember of all the parks I ever did, we never got a permit from anyone for anything. And
Boy, oh boy.
and these were ma and pa parks.
Yeah.
And they're mostly all disappeared now, the ma and pa parks, because they call them that because they were family owned. And usually the whole family worked at the parks. And after a while, when Disney and the big companies got into it, it lost that feeling of the original parks. Now it's big engineering, architect firms, and all sorts of rules and regulations, and the real fun is gone.
But thanks to you, there were a number of them within 200 miles of where we're sitting right now. You remember lots of them, don't you? You've drawn pictures of lots of them.
Yeah, well, when we moved back up here in the early 60s, I did a series of the Adirondack parks that were called Adirondack Attractions, and made pictures like this, and then got down to individual ones, and there's Frontier Town.
Look at this. Yeah, we did a matter of fact, we did a whole show down at Frontier Town after it closed, hoping that it would reopen again, and I'm sure there's still hope that Frontier Town would get reopened again. But it's so hard to recall the glory of the past. Oh, I know what this one is. This is Ausable Chasm.
Did Arto design that?
No.
You didn't do Ausable Chasm?
I did the model of Ausable Chasm, but not the original.
God did that.
Oh,
You
God.
can't see that, but you did Santa's Workshop, and your
Yeah, that was the first one.
That's Santa's Workshop. Isn't that neat?
in Storytown.
Yeah, just a second. We're going to show this.
Great. These are good
Get
pictures.
Calvin to take a look at this one. These are really, really beautiful depictions. When did you do these, Sid? These little ones?
In the I did a big, half as big as this table, a big picture with all the attractions on it, and somebody swiped that. But
So
fortunately, just had taken some little pictures of each individual thing. But
We're going to show them as we
when
go because they're so cool.
At this time, I hadn't been up here for a long. I first ran into Arto's work, and at first I was kind of ticked off at Arto. And the reason is, as a cartoonist, I thought he was unfair. I could draw a goofy fire engine, but Arto would draw a goofy fire engine, and then he'd go out and build one. Or he'd draw a castle and go out and build a castle, and that was unfair. I mean, a cartoonist is supposed to draw goofy pictures. He's not supposed to be a plumber and an electrician and a sculptor and all that stuff. But anyway, I got over it, and I realized he wasn't such a bad guy after all. So
He's so.
Sid,
yeah,
this is a little off the record here, but years ago when I first came back from the Army, and I started a little toy factory there in Upper J, a woman by the name of Marge Porter. You remember Marge Porter?
yeah, historian.
Marge Porter came and did a little story on the toy factory, and she said, I want to get you and Sid Couchey together. She said, I think you'd really enjoy each other like that. And it took 50 years before we ever got together.
That's right.
Just for the benefit of those people who may be younger than us or newcomers to the North Country, see what you've missed all these years? Yeah. Because Marjorie Lansing Porter was very famous around here. She left a tremendous mark on history here.
Great historian and a lovely gal too.
She's responsible for my original interest in the ghost towns here in the North Country. So many communities that were thriving and bustling communities in the 1800s, which, changed considerably and just about went out of business. You can still find remnants of them in the woods and old
You remember
houses.
a place called Tajas?
Oh, sure.
The first time I ever went to Tajas, it was abandoned ghost town, but there was still harnesses hanging in the livery stables. I mean the work stables, and in the hotel, the bunks were still there. Of course, there was no bedding on them, and in the office, and they had a lot of paperwork. Of course, I helped myself to a little bit of it,
My brother
but I
Jack,
kept it for to put in the land of make believe.
Oh, that's great
my
stuff.
brother Jack worked at Tajas for a while.
Did he really?
Yeah, but Marjorie Lansing Porter was such a great historian. She had fabulous stuff on the lake and
Yes,
ships
she
and
did.
captains. Is there any collection of her things anywhere?
I wouldn't be surprised. If you were to go to special collections in the Feinberg Library at Plattsburgh State, you find a lot of her papers.
Well, she did a lot of good work.
She was a very, very interesting person and a fun gal to talk to, besides all of that. But there were so many of these other theme parks around the country. You've had a connection with not just theme parks in New York State, but other states, right?
Yeah, oh yeah. I did
In the
quite
New
a-
England state, you were
Yeah.
building some kind of a three-dimensional sign when we were up there a few months ago.
Oh, I saw Calvin interviewing someone up at Storyland, New Hampshire, Glen, New Hampshire.
Yeah.
Yes, Bob Morrow was a wonderful person, and he built his theme park about the same time Land of Make Believe and Charlie Wood was building Storytown. It seemed that they all sort of came at once, within a couple of years of each other.
That was the time
And-
for it, I guess,
yeah.
in the 50s.
And then when the big boys got into the business, the little people had to leave because, most of the rides are inexpensive, or else we build them ourselves. I remember I built a little fire engine, and the kids used to line up to ride around the circle, maybe 600 feet, to ride on a fire engine. Well, today the kid would look at that and he said, well, what the hell, if it isn't as big as New York City hook and ladder, they don't want to ride it.
Isn't that funny? Whereas you and I both know that things go around in circles, and that, those of us who appreciate that kind of thing.
All the things did. Your stagecoach, it went around the big circle.
Well, there's the end of that story about the stagecoaches. We believe that's the one that's the big one that's on display at
I'm positive.
Adirondack Museum in Blue Mountain Lake right now.
Yes, I think it is.
Just as charming, but
I'll
I
let
never
you know when I
connected
find
the
out.
two until you said that.
Yeah.
It's amazing how chapters
and
of our
it's a nice
life.
place for it to be because
is.
the people at Blue Mountain Lake are really nice people, and they run a wonderful show, and they take good care of it.
How many of these theme parks did you visit? Well, of course, you didn't get here till the 60s, but
Yeah.
some of them were still in
Well,
operation,
there was
right?
in the Adirondack attractions. I think there were
Yeah.
11 anyway.
11 of us.
Yeah,
You gotta be kidding. I
including
didn't
the
realize.
ferries, and so on. Yeah.
See, we had the theory that when you came to North Pole, they had a big map that showed you all the rest of the attractions. Now you're already there, so they didn't care what happened to you afterwards. And then you go to Land of Make Believe, and we promote all the rest of the places, including North Pole. Well, they felt that if you can get them in your place, you got what you wanted out of them. Then if you could send them on to your friends, they get a little bit more. And
I love
it
it.
worked out great. And what we did was all the attractions put in a certain amount of money every year, and that money went to promote the area, not us individually, but to promote the area. Because we figured if we could get them to come into Essex County, okay, then everybody grab them.
A lot of these, some of these attractions are still around. Many of them are gone for reasons you know. Your attraction, Old Man River, got to your attraction more than
Old Man
once.
River's right.
We've talked about that so many times on this show. All the major media have done stories.
And of course, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I don't mean to,
Go
but
ahead.
I am. I don't mean to, but I am. Take, for instance, Old Forge, the Enchanted Forest over there. Now, that's still there, and that's one of the original old theme parks, but they've changed the whole concept. Now it's become a big water park, one of the best around.
Oh,
So even
really?
though it's
I haven't
still
been
running,
there.
but it's not like it used to be
They've updated.
originally.
Yeah, changed it.
And Frontier Town, of course, gone by the board. And that's a long story. That's too bad. That was a good park.
Of course, Sid and I went to Coney Island long before any of these theme parks were put together. Every once in a while, I see new things on television about Coney Island and bring back.
the steeplechase at
Oh, yeah.
Coney Island?
Every time I went there.
Yeah, I
Didn't,
used to when I
didn't
went there.
everybody?
Well, Ruth
When I
used
got
to-
on it as a little kid, I thought it was going to
Yeah.
go real fast,
Yeah.
but it just kind of went along.
Well, Ruth, the waitress here, took the parachute? Parachute in Coney Island.
So did I.
Once
And
you was a
that
kid?
parachute ride originated in Flushing Meadows at the World's Fair in 1939.
Mhm.
And I don't know if it still exists anywhere today. I haven't been to Coney Island in
Mhm.
pretty close to 50 years, so I can't tell you. But it's every once in a while you'll see the history of Coney Island on one of the public television channels. Speaking of public television and radio, a few weeks ago I called Calvin up and I said, I just heard a great interview with Arto on public radio. They
Wow.
must have come to your place and done an interview. It was a great interview.
That was the funniest thing I have to tell you about it. A fella came in one day, and I didn't pay attention to it. He said, I wonder if I could, talk to you about the park and things. And I said, sure, hell, I'll talk to everybody. And so he said,
To the animals and the
I said,
people.
where are you from? And he said, I thought he said over near Canton. So I thought he was doing a little article in the newspaper. And I didn't realize he had one of those little tape recorders about that big sitting there. And he was an awful nice young man. And we visited for a while. And he left. And that's the last I heard. Then all of a sudden I get a phone call a few days later from Florida. Somebody say, I just heard you on some radio talk. I said, I wasn't on the radio. They said, yes, you were.
You got to
I
pay
said,
attention to the
well,
little boxes that
so
people
then-
sit on your
Yeah,
table.
so then pretty quick I got a call from a place out in Ohio. And the fellow called me there and he said, I wish you could, I'd like to come and talk to you because I want to know what happened to all the old theme parks, the mom and pop parks. He said, I'm writing a story on it. And then a girl who used to come to Land of Make Believe when she was a little kid, about 7, 8 years old, called me from New Hampshire. And said, I remember being at Land of Make Believe. You remember me? And I said, yeah, I did. She said, I got something to tell you. She said, well, I used to come over to your place and I stayed with you and your wife for a week or so. And she said, she was about 7 or 8 years old. And she said, I want to tell you something now. I never let you know before, but she said, Brian Strait and I used to go out back of Land of Make Believe and smoke cigars.
Telling tales after all
I,
these years.
I think after 30 years, I got to tell you. And
Isn't that
and we get
beautiful?
a lot of phone calls from that and I've never heard it.
Well, they turned it into a national story and played it on public radio stations, including VPR in Vermont, and I'm sure up in Canton as well, North Country Public Radio. So it was played at hundreds and hundreds of public radio stations around the country. And isn't it neat when somebody discovers the North Country by that means? I think that's really, really cool. I mean, I'm very humbled. I write a little tiny column in the paper, and people discover it in Alaska and Kalamazoo, and they'll see something, just some topic like Michigans, right?
Mm-hmm.
Where do you get Michigans except here in the North Country, or stone walls, or the one I wrote. I wrote a column for next week, which will have been in the paper by the time people see this show, so I can let it out of the bag, about barns. The effect that barns have had, how I stop and take pictures of old barns, and it reminds me of the days working on the farm. But in Adventure Town, you talked about that stagecoach, and they had beautiful horses. Where they got the horses to pull that stagecoach, I don't know. But they just loved to pull that stagecoach. And I was standing in the barn one day watching them harness up these horses. I've always loved horses. And I had my hand up on the side of the wall, and a huge rat ran up next to my hand. Now, as most people would put their hand in their pocket and walk away, for some reason, instinctively, I reached out and I grabbed that rat. And I held it like this. And, of course, he was as startled as I was. And I'm looking at it, wondering what to do, and he reached around with his head, and he took a bite out of this part of my hand. And I was a different person then, far different than I am now, as you saw in that picture, and I just squeezed that poor little rat until he was much, much thinner than he'd been when he started. And he didn't have to have lunch that day. And as I said in the article, I deprived the barn cats of their meal. And the worst part of it was, the legend grew. These old-time cowboys and rodeo people were terrible about sticking it to each other, sticking it. So I became the dragon slayer of the whole place. And the story got bigger, and the size of the rat got bigger and bigger, until I'm sure they thought it was some kind of an elephant that had invaded the barn.
Did you ever
But they never took me to the doctor. Nobody said, these days you'd be suing the place for $4 million. I never got a tetanus shot, never got mercurochrome or iodine. Just went about the business.
Animal rights people would have been all over.
Well, they probably will be when they read this
No,
now. As
sure.
I said, I'm a much gentler
They'll be
person.
up here next week after. Speaking of cowboys and old cowboys, we're probably the only place in the whole world that had cowboys, like our Western cowboys. They had them in Argentina and come in Canada. But we never had any Wild West. No other country had a Wild West, which
Just
we did.
happened to be
And
the way our country developed.
And the cowboy became a symbol of America, sort of.
Yeah, when you stop to think about it.
Everybody liked cowboys, and it was a terrible life. A real cowboy on the range
Oh, yeah.
had a rough life. But
Well, think about it.
Just
And it
think,
isn't just based on the old movies, all the old dime novels, right, Sid?
just
That's
think
right.
how long the cowboy has been up on a pedestal.
Yeah. Yeah, and they're still making cowboy movies every now and again, right?
Yeah. Well, they in the old days, of course, we used to go to the theater for 10 cents. You could see,
Yeah.
and then you'd see maybe a bit of news, but the cereals and all that stuff. But it was a comfortable thing, and everybody was happy with it. The country was comfortable, and you knew that it was going to end up all right. You knew there were only 6 ways it could go anyway. Either the train came through, and or cattle came into sheep country, and or there was the villains had captured the water source. But you knew that that or broke a dam or dammed something up. Anyway, you knew there were 7 plots, and you knew the good guy came and got it all.
Good guys had the white hats,
But
right?
what happened was, I think, of course there was some scenes that had to be in it, like I always liked the places where they found hideouts. And one of the favorites was there'd be a waterfall, but you could walk in there, and there's a cave under the waterfall, and they got back into that, and you hide in there. But anyway, what happened, and I think this is when America started to slide, was that things didn't become black and failed to be black and white anymore. And I remember when television started up, and then a sheriff got a bad guy, and in his sights, unarmed, and somebody told him that he would never be prosecuted for the evidence they had, so he shot the bad guy in the back. And then all of a sudden there was the anti-hero, and you weren't sure that the white hats were always going to win after that.
Black hats,
and that's when America got unsettled. And
you think that's where we started our downslide?
That's where we started. When the good old movies started going with the good guys not being good guys anymore.
Oh, but there have been so many great cowboy movies. Calvin, how many do you own now? Do you have any idea how many old cowboy movies you own?
Several hundred.
Hundreds, and he's collecting them all the time. I want to look at this picture right here. Now, we talk about the vultures in the comic book.
Well, see, in doing this, I want to talk about the casting of this thing, by the way, a little later. But anyway, I'm a villain, so you got the black hat. Me in here got the black hat, but also in these pages, which you'll see later, I had a villain. I mean, a buzzard. Was sort of analogous to my villainy, and but then in real life, I tried to get some. A buzzard or something, but the only thing I could get was just chickadees. And that doesn't give quite the image that a buzzard does.
Not quite the same, but you sure do look the part, though, I'll tell you. That's a good neckerchief in there, huh?
Well, you might talk about this later on, I mentioned the casting, and I thought this would be a lot of fun, but then they told me that Arto was going to be cunning and clever, and describe me as vicious and
despicable.
Despicable.
Yeah, that's a good word.
Just like the duck. Despicable. And I wondered about that, but then imagine me. I happen to draw this Arto, drawing it, and I have to draw my wife going for some cowboy. And this will all be explained later. But I get hit over the head with it. It was talking about being a tough life. Drawing it was a tough life. But anyway,
some of our viewers might not be aware of the background, and we'll mention it briefly here, just so we can incorporate a lot of the history in this program. Sid, you started drawing as a very young person, but you started drawing for a living in New York City for Harvey, right?
That's right. Well, I started with assisting a guy by the name of John Leahy, who did Tommy the Big Top, Tales from a Great Book, and then soon after that, I went to Harvey Comics, yeah.
And for those people who may be viewing this and seeing these people for the first time, we welcome you to our little circle of friends on Hometown Cable in this program called Our Little Corner. But Sid drew Richie Rich for how long?
Well, I started drawing Little Dot for Harvey, and then Little Lotta, and then I did some Richie Riches after that for, altogether maybe 20 years, somewhere in there. But Richie Rich probably 10 years, something like that.
Something I want to point out before we go a moment further in this program is the fact that as we grow older, we may mellow in many ways. I don't squeeze rats to death anymore, for example. But creativity is ageless. And these two guys are ageless. They still draw almost every day, right? Right? Something almost every day. And the pictures they draw are fresh and young and vibrant. And if you were to show one of these wonderful pictures to somebody in this book and say, how old do you think these guys are that drew this comic book? They'd come up with anything from 20 to 35, but not much past that. And I for one,
I wish.
but we're grateful that spark stays with us. As you can see, these two guys are curious about life. Their lives have gone in different paths. Their talent has been used in slightly different ways over the years, but they still got it. And we're in a brand new year, the 100th anniversary of Tom Tyler in 2003, and goodness knows Calvin's already got plans for the next 50 years or more.
We
for you
have
guys,
made
so.
we have made our livelihood all our lives by drawing.
And people look at this.
Kind of unusual because I have an awful lot of friends who've changed jobs
Many
3-4
times.
years over the years.
Well,
Well, I don't know about Arto, but the toughest thing in the world for me in terms of talking with kids and especially young people that want to get into cartooning or art is to find one that's really good and then have to advise them whether or not to go to the city. And because, all I tell them is that if you have to do it, try it, but you're going to have to pick yourself up off the floor 19 or 20 times or more.
Right.
And it's a tough thing to have to advise in people. But first of all, you make sure they have talent.
Right.
But then after that, it's a tough decision.
well, as good as you guys have drawn and as much as you've done, the business didn't make you a multimillionaire.
No.
And the business didn't make you a multimillionaire because
I did. I haven't
talented,
seen it.
not today, talented people tend to do what they do because they have that passion that I've talked about so many times, and it's not necessarily connected with the big paycheck.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we got very low wages, page-wise. I got paid by the page, and I found out 2 or 3 years ago that the going rate now is 10 times what I was getting, and for a long time we didn't get any credits, but we did. But having said that, I can't see myself doing anything else, and there was a lot of, and I'm still very appreciative of talent, if that's what this is, and it has other things accrue. Like, for instance, the fact that I did Richie Rich essentially got me the first pitch up in Montreal with the Cleveland Indians. That and the fact that I was a Cleveland Indian fan.
Is there anything better in life to strive for?
I mean, what I'm saying is there's more than just monetary. And when kids tell them, Arto, that they remember 20 years ago going into the jail or something at his place and all that stuff, I'm sure he gets the same kind of kick out of it.
You got to. When somebody like this person called me on the phone yesterday, I was happy for you.
Yeah.
My father. I saw my father working at the Land of Make Believe. I got to get a copy of that tape. What's Calvin's number? And
That's
on and on and
interesting.
on. Doesn't that make you feel good?
Yes, it does make you feel
Because
good.
in the Land of Make Believe, you allowed all the neighborhood kids to come in and play all day and do things and live out their fantasy. You talk about why cowboys were famous. We live vicariously through those cowboys.
Yes, you
And when those cowboys go and get the bad guy, it was us going and get the bad
That's
guy.
right.
It's like listening to the radio. We're all from the radio age before television came along. And all those radio heroes were our heroes.
All right.
And we pictured the Lone Ranger, and we pictured all the Cisco Kid and all those guys that were on the radio in our own minds the way we wanted them to.
And I think it was much more fun that way.
Well, it was one less dimension than television, and we've never knocked television because we're on it right now. But as a medium, radio was a good medium because it fostered imagination.
That's right.
And what's wrong with imagination? Right?
Yeah, I remember what comes to mind is the thing called Little Theater off Times Square, where a guy gets in a cab and you hear all these noises, and then he gets out of the cab and they welcome him, and then they say the lights are dimming and all that stuff. Half of it was just pure imagination.
But it's in your mind. I'm a fan of Prairie Home Companion on public radio, and they have a guy in that show, and I wish I could remember his name, who is of the old school of sound effects. And what he can't do with the props he's got, he does with his mouth.
Yeah.
And they'll do these stories to tax him right to the limit. So he's got to go from screeching cars to sirens to telephones in 1 second's time.
I never heard that.
And I used to go to Radio City as a youngster back in the early 40s and watch these people at work as they did the radio shows. They invited people in to watch them, you know. And to watch these sound effects guys, I was always blown away by what they'd use for horses' hooves and things on their chest and the rain and the doors opening and closing and running and oh yeah, he's got it.
Yeah.
He's got it. Whoa! In the door. Open the door. Well, we've the three of us have lived a lot of years and had a lot of fun, and we're going to continue our discussion about Tom Tyler and a myriad of other interesting subjects in just a moment. I just want to talk for a moment now that we've resumed operations here on this program with Sid Couchey and Arto Monaco and Ruthie and Calvin and myself, how when you get to know somebody, you find out what parallels your life takes.
Yeah.
I mean, I've interviewed Sid numerous times. We first met really when he illustrated a book on marketing that our good friend Nancy Church did.
Right.
And I helped her with a chapter on marketing for radio, and Sid drew the pictures, and we were having lunch one day, and we're sitting and talking about what we've done and where we've been, and I asked him, you know, about how he first met Ruth, and he talked about going to this lake down in, where is it, Rockland County? Rockland County, Requa Lake. And I said, it might interest you to know that my middle name is Requa, not the most common name in the world. It happens it was my uncle's lake that these two went to
Yeah.
once or twice, or
That's right. Well, yeah. Well, she chased me and cornered me down in Requa Lake. Yeah.
she chased you till you caught her. I know. That's what my wife tells me all the time. But our lives parallel each other. And then to meet this guy, do a series of interviews with him, and all of a sudden, during the last program, find out that he designed this adventure town. And while we're sitting here today and talking about it, and Calvin showing me that picture of the rodeo, I'll never forget, there was another guy who worked there, an old-time cowboy named Gordie something.
Oh, Gordie.
And he worked up in
It was Great Escape after that.
after that. I
Yes.
lost track of him. I can't remember
What
his
was
last
his
name,
name?
not Gordie Howe.
No, but
Gordie,
he was a good.
not that Gordie Howe anyway. It was Gordie something.
Yeah.
He and I became very good friends. I'm just a young, I'm 20 years old when this picture was taken.
Yeah. Well,
so that's
Gordie
a long.
moved on down to Storytown. It was at that time changed
He was
its
a
name.
quick draw artist.
Yeah.
He was very good with a bullwhip, with a
That's
long bullwhip.
Gordie, I can't remember his name.
See that? See what I'm talking about? This is what I want to bring up here.
But I didn't know him. He was a nice guy.
He was a wonderful
The
guy,
kids
and
loved it.
he was my mentor. And one day they got together, probably right after the rat incident, and I was the hero of the thing because I killed a rat. And they said, Gordie, you ought to try to ride bulls.
Oh.
And you take a look at those you've seen those big white Brahma bulls? I mean, they're nasty when they're standing still, And they said, it's really not as hard as it looks. You can stay on for a few seconds. You just grab this thing, and they didn't tell me that you grab this thing and you say a fervent prayer saying, no, I'm going to die. And then when that chute opens and that bull goes flying out there, and you think the horses are bad, to have those giant bulls that can twist and spin and jump, and you're so grateful when it's over every time. And why anybody would do it more than once or do it for a living is far beyond me. I look back on it now, and that's another one of those things that my children and grandchildren never believed until we show them actual pictures of it here today. But to have this contact with you after all these years and refresh those memories is really pleasant for me. And then Calvin shows me a picture. We did a couple of historical shows last year of the history of Messina and Malone. And then the historian from Messina, Teresa Sharp, sent Calvin a picture of my old school and the church next door where my father was a country preacher. And I went to school from 3rd grade to 8th grade in that little schoolhouse, which is not here anymore. But many, many, many years after that, my school desk showed up in Salmon River.
No kidding.
Somebody went to they had an old schoolhouse converted to a home, went to look for a school desk and sent her husband out. I don't know what junk heap he found it in, and brought it and put it in. And a little short while later, she was polishing it up to put her plants on it in the foyer, and said, "Wait a minute."
Carve your name in it, probably.
It said Gordie Little. I can remember when I was 8 years old taking the compass, the sharp end of the compass, and scratching that and thinking I did the most evil deed in the world, holding my book in front of it while I drew my name on that desk. And it followed me. It almost caught me.
Did they get their press charges? Or?
Not after all those years. Fortunately, most of the people were gone from this veil of toil and sin by that time. Well, let us talk a little bit more about this tremendous comic book. And you guys have been talking about how hard it was to be serious and putting this serious comic book together. And you got a horse that smiles, and Arto complimented Sid on the drawing of horses. It's not too easy to draw horses.
No, it isn't. No, it's not. And Sid did a nice job. The first one I saw, I said to Linda, I said, "Look, I don't know if Sid's been around horses a lot, but it said he really knows how to draw them."
Have you been around horses, or it's just a...
No. We've had more family pigs than we have horses. But,
I don't think you've got any pigs in here, do you?
well, riding pigs wasn't quite as ceremonious.
Oh, God.
See, the
You're
position
amazing.
that Sid has got there, the position of this horse, it's hard to draw a horse in that position, but he captured it.
Yep.
And the thing that I liked about it is that he captures it in just a line. Now, if you took a brush and ink, you could whip this in loose and give you a lot of action and stuff like that, but you wouldn't have all these muscles in. He did a good job.
Oh, golly. But who would think about that except when they read the comic book and say, "That's a nice horse"?
That's one thing about doing black and white line. That is fortunate. That horse is white, but then I'm not nearly as successful when a horse or a cow or something is
A different color?
yeah. Now, what I used to do in the old days was get some stuff called Ben-Day.
Yes.
And
I haven't used it in
I
years.
can't find it anyway. Instead
I don't know.
of
Tell me what it is. I don't know what it is.
Well, it's
I thought you said Ben Gay. I was going to say.
Ben-Day.
We all need it. Ben Day.
it's a bunch of what it is, a sheet of dots.
Yep.
And depending on how thick they are, they can be light gray or dark gray, and you just put a sheet of it on there, and wherever you want it to be gray, you cut out with a knife, and it's a nice. But here, with all the scratchy stuff, it's not very smooth. But anyway.
That's very interesting. How I don't know the mechanics of,
Well, I like
of
the
that kind
pen
of
and
thing.
ink better, Sid, than I do the Ben-Day.
Well, I do too,
But the Ben-Day was fast, and
yeah.
Well, see, that's a new one.
It's consistent. But of course, in the old days, everything was cross-hatching. The old comics are all cross-hatching. There's no such thing as any kind of tone.
Well, we're going to get into the comic book now, and I want you, Calvin's going to actually superimpose the pictures as we talk. You can look at them and read every panel, go through every panel.
Why don't you read the panel, then
Re-
we'll both talk about it. Why don't you read it, Gordie? 'Cause
Okay. Okay, this is the first page inside, right?
Yeah.
Tom Tyler and the three saddle mates. Here we go. Ambling west with no particular agenda, young Tom Tyler had traced the Black Dog Trail as far as the Big Spring River, where he camped overnight. And now you had the storyline, and you had to come up with each picture, right?
Yeah. Well, in this case, it's self-explanatory, and really no explanation required until we get into conversations. Well, the next.
But it lists Tom Tyler as the Adirondack frontiersman. Up at the crack of dawn of a particularly bright mid-August day, Tom Tyler follows the early morning shadows into an awakening back Baxter Springs, Kansas. Baxter Springs. You're going to tell us where Baxter Springs came from?
Well, I can't tell you where it came from, but...
I mean, where did the idea come from?
Well, just grabbed a map of Canvas and I said, I want a town that's near Oklahoma and near Missouri so I can have the outlaws running into the Badlands to escape. So I came up with Baxter Springs when I was doing the story. And I just got curious and said, well, maybe there's some information on the internet about Baxter Springs. And I found out there's a lot of history on Baxter Springs. It was a cow town, and it has an amazing history. So we incorporated the history of Baxter Springs in the story of Tom Tyler. So I'm gonna send as soon as we get this halfway started, I'm gonna send a copy down to the people in Baxter Springs and see if they're interested in promoting it down at that end of the world.
Maybe some rich businessman from Baxter Springs will foot the bill for the... Well, maybe
Not
not.
only Baxter Springs is legitimate, but Cal also did research, and these were actual stores and stuff that were in
Opperman
there.
Harness and Saddle Shop, Tuttle's, an Illinois cash store. Okay, then we get down here, and who are these characters in this next panel?
Well, that's explained here. That's Tom coming into town, and Olin's is a restaurant that he stops in front of, and that again is was in the 1880s or something like that, out there, and Polster's was a legitimate store, and they were next to each other.
Really, the town folks mostly ignore Tyler as he hitches his trusty steed Baron in front of Olin's restaurant. Baron?
Baron was the name of one of his horses.
It was? Oh, really? Oh, that's great. Okay. So a lot of time and effort has gone into researching this thing as well as to drawing it. All right, the next panel. Been several days since Tom has eaten anything other than his own campfire version of rabbit and beans.
Okay, the plot thickens, and he opens the door, and there's some silhouettes in there, and who are they?
Oh,
The plot thickens.
I love it. It'll be much easier to turn the pages when we get the real comic books. Tom is looking forward to a sit-down meal, and the pleasant sight of his waitress, Ruth, she says, smiling, adds to the pleasure of the experience, and he says, "Morning, ma'am." She says, "What can we get you today?" Ruthie, is that's a perfect, exact likeness, too, huh? Is that taken
She
from
had-
life or a recent picture?
30 years ago.
She had coal, black, shiny hair, curly. Yeah, that's pretty close.
Look at the pots and pans and things, and I can see the coffee brewing in the next panel where it says, "It's an unusually slow morning, so Ruth finds herself with plenty of time to chat with the handsome young stranger."
I'll take care of the roof. Are you just passing through? You don't do a very good Ruth voice.
Oh, Chet Bosworth should be here with Miss Lonely Hearts. I love it. Tom, normally not all that talkative, finds himself telling his charming waitress about growing up in Witherby, New York,
Bingo.
which is real. And he says it's a small iron mining town in the Adirondacks, not far from Lake Champlain. He's pointing over his shoulder.
Mhm.
And that's a good picture of Tom and Ruthie, right?
Unfortunately, yes. Don't like the idea of what's happening here, but
Well, you know. Coming from a rugged mining community, Tom's sinewy body gives evidence to his early introduction to hard labor. This is quite an active panel right here.
well, yeah, he's his father before him worked in the mine. I guess he took a short whack at it. But anyway, it locates Mariah, Mineville, and Port Henry all being
Your
close
favorite-
by,
your
and then
favorite- your
then
favorite
then
bird up there too.
yeah, and
Top
then
of it.
the start of the vultures. But anyway, then a private joke here, and Tom is saying, "Where did Padres go?" I thought he was going to help. Instead, there's a guy in the background throwing a baseball at a target or a rock or something, getting practice for his baseball career.
Johnny Padres, left-handed.
Yep.
See, as we know, because he's been the subject of another interview on this program. Okay, let's move down. Tom had learned to handle a gun at a young age, hunting squirrels in the woods between Witherby and Port Henry. I didn't see the squirrel there. I don't know if it got away that
Well,
time.
I didn't dare show him being. It's not like squeezing a rat, you know. It's,
Boy, we're never going to live that down.
yeah, like
I'm almost sorry. I brought it up.
Arto doesn't show anything
Okay.
being killed, so the squirrel got away.
That's another very active panel. You've got trees and rocks and glens and water going by and the whole 9 yards. Nice hat, too, on him. I like that hat. Okay, the next one. Although not afraid of hard work, the mining life didn't appeal to Tom. And so, a few months back, he and Barron took the D&H at Port Henry, south to Albany, where together they began their trek westward. Nice train. We got
D&H.
horses and people in the D&H train. Have you drawn engines before?
Not
That's a good.
that
That's
I
a
can
good,
remember.
That's a good layout.
Oh, I love that.
Nice composition.
But,
See that?
I worked for Alco in Schenectady before this war, but
Did you?
but I didn't draw trains.
Well, that's a great train. I like that one. All right, next. We're getting into it. I'm getting excited.
You
Huh?
didn't knock these out. I can tell that. Now look at this hat. You
Yeah.
see?
I love it.
Probably if I'd been doing it, I'd just cut the hat and said, the hell with it.
All right.
He did a lot of work in
They
it.
did that.
However, it would have served its purpose. I mean, you're in its own way. You know, that's an art to, with an economy of line, to get almost the same effect.
Yeah. All right, here we go. Next page. In turn, Ruth tells Tom about the rich history of Baxter Springs. And Ruth says,
This was one of the first cow towns.
she's still talking, isn't she?
Oh yeah. Well, yeah.
Never mind.
And she has a cold. A boom town. Well, go ahead.
Boomtown Baxter Springs has thrived until the railroads came to Texas. You got the Pony Express and whatever that other word.
Yeah, Bischofsberger. But this one now, I didn't have enough science. I'm just assuming that they had the Pony Express.
Okay, that's close
There's
enough. And
room
you've
for
got
another
some,
one.
you got some good-looking steers in there. Yeah. So everybody's on their way. Now she says the town had survived a massacre at the hands of Quantrell's raiders in 1863. Boy, talk about, look at the action in this one. People are
Well-
getting knocked off here.
Well,
They're tracing bullets right to
well,
the
they're
top of
missing.
the- Oh, they're missing.
It doesn't show any blood spurting
No.
anyway.
Well, at least it's happening in front of Harvey Kane, the Undertaker's.
Yeah,
So
but
they
you-
didn't have far to go.
You have to get a little rough when you're describing a massacre.
Well, of course, and the glass is broken there, and the windows, and Chicago drugstore is on fire, and
Right.
wow. And the next one, Baxter Springs has been without a town marshal since 1872, when Mayor J.R. Boyd shot City Marshal C.M. Taylor over a disputed warrant for arrest.
Okay, this is another valid thing. Really happened, and the problem was, and Cal did a lot of research on this. He shot the guy, and the story went that he was serving a warrant. And at first, I just had him. Let's see, did I had him with it? What?
He had the gun in his holster.
Yeah,
Oh,
that's
yeah.
right. And then they might, Baxter Springs might be a little upset because actually, he might have given him trouble. So whether it was a valid shooting or not. So then I had both ways. So he possibly had shot at him, but anyway, it was still while serving the warrant.
I'm sure somebody cares about that, maybe in Baxter Springs,
Somebody's
right?
great-grandfather.
That could very well be,
Hey, wait a
too.
minute, he
All
didn't
right.
gun him down.
No.
He was threatened. So anyway.
Now I come to my favorite place in this comic book, in the next picture, where it says, Law and Order was presently administered by the overworked Cherokee County Sheriff, Two-Gun Gordy. And you used that that old press photograph, didn't you, to make this
That's
picture?
right. I couldn't, I didn't believe it, but I drew it
No, I
anyway.
couldn't- how could anybody ever believe that was real? A left-hander, which is also true to life, Padres and me. A left-hander, Gordy got his nickname from his two guns, both worn on the left side. You don't hardly see that anymore.
No, that's what this guy is saying right there.
Yeah, he's got his hand saying no.
You know,
this-
if I had done my research, I would have had you squeezing a rat in that picture there.
That would have been that would have been good for a few sales anyway. All right, moving right along. As Ruth and Tom chat, the tranquility is suddenly shattered with a sound of gunfire in the streets.
Bang, bang, bang.
And you could see the perennial question mark.
Right. How do I?
Well, that's a cartoonist have used question marks and
Exclamation
I
point.
wonder who the first cartoonist was who used all the squiggly things for expletives in the funny
Well,
papers.
Al Camp did it all the time, but it was long before that, I'm
There are a
sure.
lot of them that show up in Beetle Bailey, aren't there? I love it. All right, we digress. What's going on here? It's the three saddlemates. They were hightailing it through town when Two Gun tried to stop them. They shot him.
They shot Two Gun.
I got to point out, we use that phrase, what's going on here, and I asked Sid to make that old prospector look like Bob Ben.
Oh, the late Bob Ben and his show, over 500 shows with Calvin Castine on Hometown Cable called What's Going On Here? Isn't that neat? This town's wilder than Mineville on a Saturday night. Don't you love it? Oh, just terrific. Okay, the shooting has interrupted Ruth before she could relate that Baxter Springs, located just north of the Indian Territory on the Kansas-Missouri border, is a popular escape route for desperados fleeing Kansas lawmen. So we got a little map and a skull. Skulls are always good, aren't they?
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Wild West.
Joplin, Missouri, very famous place. I know a few songs with Joplin, Missouri in there. Okay, the next one. I love this one. We got creatures in the trees and vultures and snakes and squirrels and I don't know what all.
Well, these guys scare everything.
Oh, of
Humans and-
course.
Human and animal.
Perhaps the most notorious of the lot is the cold-blooded trio known as.
The
fanfare.
three saddlemates.
Oh, look at this. That's a great shot. I love the horses skidding sideways and the clouds of
they
Had a lot
dust.
of fun doing that.
Oh,
They
my.
aren't too particular. All of them have shots through their hats.
Well, you got to have holes in the hats, right? Got to have holes, and we prove that in the next three panels. They're led by I wish I could say that with a little lisp. It would be more effective. The despicable
Porky Pig.
Sid the Kid, known for his fast draw. That's probably true to life too, right, Ruth?
Oh, yeah.
Which part?
A subject.
The
Wait,
stick-up
wait.
or fast draw.
Fast draw.
Okay.
With suave but cunning Arto, who never seems to run out of ways to cause mayhem. Boy, I've seen that mustache before.
Yeah.
It hasn't been that color for a couple
not
of years.
for
but-
years.
Oh, I love it. Well, he's almost looks like he's got a halo over his head. We haven't gone overboard here, have we?
Well, yeah, but I was resenting because of what happens later with
Okay.
the fun he has
Oh,
later.
God. Now, this is the best caricature of all. The next panel is, I love it. And he showed me this picture, and I fell right on the floor. And Colorado Cal, often described as being strong as an ox and almost twice as smart. Is that a left-handed compliment? I love it. These are just absolutely beautiful. Okay, here we go. You all right, Sheriff? I'll be okay. Just help me over to Doc's. And here's the guy in the background
Yeah.
saying, "Oh no."
Somebody must.
Yep. Once they flee into Missouri or into the Indian Territory, they're out of my jurisdiction. I'd like to help, Tom says, right?
Nice guy.
Nice guy. There's a reward for each of them. If someone could bring them back to Kansas, I could arrest them. I look, Jim's pretty good store, right? Oh,
Yeah.
That's
Well,
good.
that
That's great.
looks just about like it.
and this little guy looks almost familiar over here, too, doesn't he? That's almost a familiar face.
Gotta have bystanders.
Yeah, of course. And the next one, I can handle myself, but I'd be no match for the three of them. They generally split up after they get out of Kansas and then arrange to team up again when they need money. And I can tell you where each of them hangs out between jobs, but be careful. They're as dangerous individually as they are as a trio. I never thought about being a bounty hunter, but I could sure use the money, and I'd be helping to make Baxter Springs a safe place to live. Good luck, partner. I bet you'd just love to write that,
yeah.
didn't you?
Yeah.
Good luck, partner.
It couldn't have been said any other way.
No. Boy, these are great.
Well,
These
here's
are-
anyway.
Okay, Last Chance Saloon Telegraph Office. Next to Last Chance Saloon. I love it. So we're in Joplin. Peanut brittle? Come on. Come on, Sidney.
Well, then we got this guy welcoming everybody.
Oh, of course. And the guy's just going out the door.
I gotta tell you, you talk about riding that Bronco. Keeping this guy straight was like riding that Bronco.
He just wanted to have a little fun. Tom figures he should start with the shrewdest one of the trio. The better to catch him off guard. The ever-charming Arto's busy. Get this now. The ever-charming Arto's busy entertaining a bevy of beauties at the
Oh, boy.
Last Chance Saloon.
Hey, thank you, Sid.
He's having a good time already.
Don't think I didn't resent that.
I bet he did.
And Arto says, "Dag nabbit." Oh, that's another great phrase, isn't it? Dag nabbit. Did I ever tell you ladies how I outsmart Earp over in Tombstone territory? Wyatt's turning over in his grave, isn't he?
So Cal had a little trouble here too. Had to put something on the table, so I put drinks and a couple of playing cards and then some dominoes.
See this?
Yeah.
I love it. I'd stick to sarsaparilla and be at my best when I face him off.
That's another point of contention with Cal. He said, "A straw?"
I love your trademark spider and a few cobwebs on the spittoon for people.
Oh, this guy's
Yeah.
it pretty easy.
He's laid up pretty good, and there's my rat. He finally
Yeah.
showed up. The dog's looking at him, saying, "Where's Gordie when we need him?" The ladies and I'll have another round, barkeep. Oh, that's you talking back there, I can tell.
Yeah.
This guy's got an arrow through his hat. Lemon line, leftover aid.
Right.
Oh, gosh. And this is how we do the time thing. Later that evening.
Right.
Well, I think it's time to call it a night. Good night, fair ladies. Isn't that wonderful?
Yeah, dude.
Oh,
Real mannerly.
Yeah. Not so fast, Arto. You got an appointment with the law in Baxter Springs. This is so. I love this. Not without a fight.
Sorry, Arto, but you brought it on yourself.
Yeah, I guess I did, Sid.
Have it your own way. There's another one of the great words of all time. Dang!
Yeah.
Isn't it great? Later, back at the border.
That's better than a death rattle or something.
Oh, of course. With the wooden sidewalks. Later, back at the border. He never would have got me if I'd have known he was coming. Huh? I'll take him from here, Tom. Good luck in Pineville. See you in a few days, Sheriff. That's this. Meanwhile, back at the ranch. When not busy robbing banks or holding up stagecoaches in Kansas, Colorado Cal keeps busy on his small ranch just outside of Pineville, Missouri. There you are. I love it. He's saying my herd's small enough that I don't have to work too hard, but it's big enough to make me look like an honest rancher. Hold it right there, partner. Are you a cattle rustler, stranger? Look at this poor cow's got his tongue out. He must have had a hard day. Oh. There's only one outlaw here, and he's about to face justice. Yow!
We already did a dang, so
Okay, so we got a yow and we got a ping. And, oh boy. If you weren't so yellow, you'd drop that 6-shooter and we'd settle this man to man. Cal's pretty tough.
he talks a good fight.
Yeah. We'll let the law decide who's a real man. In the meantime, we'll find someone to watch your cattle. What's he got it? Oh, he really destroyed the end of his gun. He's a pretty good shot, wouldn't you say? Put the bullet right in the end of his gun. Okay,
And
this
also,
is
he's getting hit by a cow's tail.
getting the cow's tail.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's a commentary or the cow insult to injury. Now this is a big panel. This is a good one. You've had good luck so far, Tom. The reward would set you up pretty good if you just want to settle, or if you want to settle for just the two of them. I think we'll all rest better when Sid the Kid is behind bars too, Sheriff.
Be careful, Tom. We all know the kid is ruthless.
Oh, that reminds me of a song. Ruthless, remember that song? Oh, look at this.
That's a good panel.
Oh, that's great. Wait a minute. We got the mice in here, and we got the apple. And
Somebody's put a bit of piece out of the apple.
yeah, maybe that was the mouse, and maybe not. Boy, oh boy, we're getting there, aren't we? After hitting the trail hard, Tom and Barron arrive in Wheaton. We've got a place changed from the Civic Center to the jail. If our luck holds out, we'll get the kid before he knows what's happening. That's a good
Well, there's
street.
some couple of places I haven't finished. Right there.
That's all right. Everywhere Tom goes, the story's the same. The kid is nowhere to be found. The kid, what?
A couple of local characters there.
Are they? Like, you
Well,
want
this is a pretty good gym store, and this is a friend of ours, Tom Carrot.
Oh, good. Well, we got to make sure they know who they are here. If the kid heard about his partners, he may have hightailed it to the Badlands. I'll go let Two Gun know that the kid's taken off. Meanwhile, back in Baxter Springs, Sid the Kid surprises the still recuperating Two Gun.
Yeah, I'm not through yet.
I wouldn't go reaching for that shooting iron if I were you, Sheriff.
You probably know Judge Lewis,
I think it's just
Charlie Lewis.
wonderful that we got Charlie in there somewhere, because I'll never forget all those sterling comments he made during your induction into the
Hall of
First
Fame,
Pitch Hall of Fame.
Right.
And I'll never remember all those Irishman of the Year banquets,
I
breakfasts
heard
that
about
Charlie
it.
was the master of ceremonies. He's just a good guy. Okay, with Two Gun locked in his own cell, we can wait and spring a trap on that Easterner when he shows up. I think Cal's got quite a skip,
I like the
doesn't
way
he?
he's sit.
That's what I just
I like the
said.
way
He's
Cal
got a
walks.
very special skip
Yeah.
there.
John Wayne type.
Yeah, obviously.
John Wayne.
Never mind. Our unsuspecting hero arrives in Baxter Springs unaware of the pending ambush. Yeah, Cal's
I
up
don't
on
know
the,
how he got up there.
he's on the roof. He's got plenty of spare shells, and that's great. That's wonderful. All right, and this is the last panel. A splash of sunshine reflecting off a rifle barrel alerts Tom, and he springs into action. You're getting a little poetic with your... all right. Springs into action. That's quite a spring, isn't it?
Yeah, it sure
It
is.
looks like he's going to land on his head, and he lands on his feet. Both guns blazing, Tom quickly disarms Colorado. Boy, that's really tough for him up on
In
the
the
roof there.
meantime, what's his name sneaks out here.
Yeah, Sid?
Arto.
Arto. Arto. Spinning, he spots Arto with his guns drawn. Man, kabunk.
See,
Oof.
now instead of killing this guy, he fell down and he says, "Oof!" So he's still alive, I guess.
So we know Colorado's okay, but he took an awful kabunk.
Yeah, and
I
his
noticed
gun
that
this
he
time the
bounced.
gun shot right in two.
Yeah,
That's
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 good
both
thing
of
he
his
had a
guns.
second gun. All right. Meanwhile, Sid the Kid flees into Olin's restaurant with Tom in hot pursuit.
Now this is where it gets where I had a tough time drawing this stuff. The last two panels.
Ruth, alerted by the gunfire, calmly takes things into her own hands.
Calmly.
She swings a pretty mean spider, doesn't she?
Yes, and then she says, I've always wanted to do that.
We got a boing. These are great cartoon words. Boing. With the three
I
saddle.
love those words,
Don't you?
I love
do.
those
I
words.
love 'em. With the three saddlemates behind bars, this might be a nice place to settle down for a while. And Ruth says,
That sounds like a great idea. And I say, I'm seeing I'm seeing polka dots.
oh boy, this was.
Notice who's kind of sad. That's the
Oh.
only one that has any sympathy for me.
Sid, I have to compliment you again. I think you did a wonderful job on these.
Well, thank you.
And
It's
and there's so much of it. And I like your horses. And Tom Tyler, you got him right down good.
Isn't this
I
the
tried to
greatest?
copy him there, and I couldn't do that.
And in the lower right-hand corner of the last panel, as you might have guessed, it says "The End," or maybe the beginning. Calvin's already got another chapter. This will require a little bit of refining, and I have no idea how long it's going to be before it hits the stands. But I think it's time for Calvin to talk again a little bit and tell us about what you hope to do from here on, Calvin. Take the microphone.
Okay, well, the whole idea of this book is, as we mentioned, to celebrate the 100th anniversary of the birth of Tom Tyler. He's a native son who went on to, I think, fame in Hollywood. Certainly over 50 starring roles, well over 100 movies altogether. Outside of Buster Crabbe, he was probably the most well-known performer in serials, which so many of us enjoyed watching those old chapter serials in the movies. And I thought it was also a chance to get two of our local legends involved in this, and to get Arto and Sid on this project, and it just makes it a great North Country project. And we're hoping that the money will go to the Port Henry Museum through the Port Henry Town of Moriah Historical Society, I think the official name is. So Joan Davy's going to do that. So all the profits will be used for the museum, and hopefully they'll be able to get some Tom Tyler items there and pay tribute to a native son. But it was more than just Tom Tyler. I also wanted a chance to work with both of these individuals, so it's a pleasure for me.
You know, they talk about having a sixth sense, and I think it's time to blow the horn of Calvin Castine a little bit. I was talking with our mutual friend, Shan Moore, the other day, and we did a really fun interview with a young man by the name of Kevin Couchey, who's disabled because of cerebral palsy, and yet he's made a tremendous mark in the North Country. He writes in a special way with a pointer that's hooked to his head on a computer. He's a beautiful person, and Shan Moore paid a little tribute to Calvin, saying he just knows how to do it. He knows what's right. And I think this situation proves he knows what's right. I mean, people shouldn't have as much fun as we have when we get together and sit around and talk about these things. And so if for no other reason than to put Tom Tyler on the map in the North Country where he should be, if this was his original hometown, then we've accomplished something. All of us have really accomplished something. When Calvin and I first went down there, of course I had never heard of Tom Tyler or didn't connect him with The Phantom and some of those other great shows until he filled me in, gave me my liberal education. We went down there and people didn't know. A lot of people down there had no clue that that's where this young man's career had started. So I think it's a good thing to do that. We went down there when they opened their mining museum in Port Henry and enjoyed being there and saw the old train cars that they have and a lot of memorabilia inside, and met Joan for the first time and talked to some of the other people involved in history and interviewing some of the miners. So it's all tied together. And it's true, as Calvin says, Tom Tyler, after appearing in all those movies and all those serials, was never captured forever in a comic book. And so it's about time. And isn't it neat to be connected?
He's about the only one.
Yeah. Well, we've all been in comic books now, right?
Was Tom Tyler married ever?
Yeah, he married one of his co-stars. Her name was Jean Martell, but they divorced, and he ended up dying with his sister in Detroit.
He died very young at the age 50, as Calvin and said, and we pointed out several times, and it's too bad because he was physically a broken man. We mentioned what a huge man he was and how he was a champion weightlifter, and that's a shame. What do you got over here?
Oh, I don't know. I was just going to leave these with Cal in case I just did a couple of things that maybe in promotion or something like that might be able to use. But
that's neat.
well, I had to do it in self-defense because I knew if I didn't do them, Cal would ask for it.
Oh, I love it. Look at this with the TT on the side. Oh, yeah.
You mentioned giving Cal some credit, and I guess he's due some. He has, he's a pretty good guy, and he has some pretty good ideas. He runs a tight ship, though. I mean, he's very picky about his syntax and using the right tense, present or past tense and all that stuff. And but he means well. I mean, there's no question.
Yeah, he means.
I think. What do you think?
Oh, well, you took care of him very nicely in the comic book, so there wouldn't have to be any other retribution after that.
I didn't have to do any research for the comic book. I mean, he walks funny, and that was easy.
He's afraid of heights, and we couldn't figure out a way to show that in the thing. We had him up on the roof, but you don't know how he got up there.
No, that's the magic of.
But I think if nothing else, we have pointed out how much work it takes to put something like this together. Now, this didn't happen in 2 days.
I know how much work he put into it.
Well, your part is considerable too.
No, that was just a day or so, but Sid really put a lot of work in this.
Every day.
Every day?
Since when did you commission him?
One of these things is that I said Arto and I were talking about not making big money and with Richie Rich and all that stuff, but there are other things that accrue. Now I said that my drawing Richie Rich and you and Cal getting on that bandwagon got me first pitch and ultimately in the first ball pitchers Hall of Fame. I have no doubt that I stand a good chance of getting in the Wild West Grade B movie Villains Hall of Fame. The only trouble is there's two guys here that I'm afraid are going to be nominated at the same time. But it does say that I'm the most villainous and the most despicable.
You give yourself credit there.
Yeah.
The interesting part of it is comic books are still going strong. They're far different than they were when you first drew Richie Rich or any of your other beloved characters. But there's still people making a living drawing comic books.
Yeah. However, they are a different genre, right?
They certainly are, aren't they?
And it's all the shoot 'em. I've said this before on camera, probably the other time, but I had kids when I was one of the last times I had kids drawing, about 7th or 8th grade, and I said to the boys and girls, draw anything you want. I wanted to see where they were at. So the boys all drew pickup trucks or cars and stuff, and the girls had a bigger variety. But so I wanted to break them out of that, and I told the guys, okay, now this time draw me something in the foreground, a nice tree or some recognizable thing, and then something else, and then a landscape in the background. So almost all of them drew a tree in the foreground, in the background put a gas station with pickup trucks. But anyway, that was a long time ago. The last time I did it, I haven't done it since the time I'm speaking about. The last time I did it, I told them to draw anything they want. They drew guys fighting with swords, lopping arms off, and arrows going into people. I couldn't believe the violence that was in them, and it made me discouraged. I haven't done it since.
It's the age we live in. It's the age we live in, and some of
Yeah, you're so bloodthirsty now.
Yeah, it's far different. It seems like we were better able to detach ourselves from. We knew this was fantasy back in those days, and I'm not sure that all kids, they live in such a violent age in their homes, in their schools, in their neighborhoods, that it just perpetuates itself. And it is kind of a sad commentary on our times, you know, whatever happened to the Richie Riches and...
Well, it does get back again to the white hats and the black hats. You
Yeah,
knew
it
in the
sure
old
does.
westerns that the good
Yeah.
was going to triumph, and
Yep.
it was corny, but it was helpful.
Well, that, you know, there were so many other great Western stars that we all remember. You never actually drew a comic book, did you? Did you ever?
No, I never did.
You drew so
I-
many millions of other things,
Well-
and comic book-like characters. So
Well,
many
I was just thinking about it. You know, the comic books have things like cities put in there, bang, ouch, question marks,
Yeah.
swear marks.
Yeah.
All those things you only see with the comic book artist.
Yeah.
And that, I think it's great. You know, when the guy says, "Pow, boy, you really was sailing."
You wonder who the first one to say "pow" was. But these, you know, comic books have been around
Oh, no.
for how long?
Well, I don't know about comics, but comic strips. Well, the first colored one was in the last 2 centuries ago. It was in 1895 when the Yellow Kids first started in newspaper comic strips. That was the first colored comic strip. But yeah, Cass and Jammer kids, they always had POWs and all those old timers. Toonerville Trolley.
Oh boy, you see many people watching this
Oh,
now.
Crazy Cat was
Oh,
always
my goodness.
banging people on the head. Pow, zap, bing.
Remember Coco, the little clown used to come out of the ink bottle?
Yeah, oh, that was
Max
great.
Fleischer.
Yeah, Max Fleischer.
And all those wonderful characters.
That was
Sid,
fascinating.
you know, another one that I just loved his work was Harriman,
Oh, yeah.
George
Crazy
Harriman?
Cat, right?
Crazy Cat.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
And I had a few originals of his.
Yeah, no kidding.
And he was just great the way he drew. And he used to, someone told me that he used to go around to the different desks and pick up all the old pen points. And he would draw that because they'd kind of catch and scratch, and that's where you see all that little
Isn't
ink
that
mark.
interesting? I never heard that before
Yeah.
today.
And,
Style all his own.
and it was such a simple story.
Yeah.
The cat loved, let's see, no, the dog loved the cat, and the cat loved the mouse,
Yeah.
but the mouse hated the cat, and the dog was constantly arresting the mouse to protect the cat.
Isn't that amazing?
Another one that was sort of similar was the Toonerville folks.
Oh,
Trolley.
Toonerville Trolley. Oh my goodness.
Not trolley car. A matter of fact, I made a little trolley car. Well, it didn't look exactly like the Toonerville trolley car, but when I first started Toy Factory there, we made a little trolley car. And that was one of the most popular things there was. It was it looked like the little
Yeah.
Toonerville trolley car.
Isn't that
Yeah.
great? I had forgotten the Toonerville Trolley
Yeah.
till now.
I found some pictures of our kids over at your place and the jail and stuff just recently.
Oh,
Why didn't we get together earlier in life?
isn't it amazing?
Yeah.
You went to Land of Make Believe. I was there every day.
Is that right?
Well, of
We
course,
probably thought you were too big shot, that you wouldn't see us.
Listen, no, never be a big shot.
well, I
think
The
that
thing is that I was just lucky and happened to be able to make a living off of my artwork.
it's the land of make believe is a
When you
study in
talk about,
pathos.
uh,
Believe me.
I've never been. I've always thought I should have done better. You know, I should do
I guess we
better
all
than
felt
everything I
that
do.
way.
And I'm sure you do. And the big shots are the ones that come in and say, tell me how good they are. And then they say, do you mind, I brought a few pictures along, do you mind if I go out in the car and bring them in, show them to you? And I bring them in. God, some of the stuff is horrible. And what are you supposed to say? I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, so I usually
Don't
say,
call us, we'll call you.
I usually say, look, I'm not an art critic. I can't criticize art. I don't know how. And I think you should go see somebody. I'll send them over to you next time.
Send him over to Sid. Well, there are rewards for everything we do, and yeah, we've had tough times. All of us have had tough times, but here we are today, having such a great time talking about things. Do you want to look at some of the?
I'll use them.
Oh, you can use them in the background and stuff. when we
I
talk.
want to ask you guys, I want you to talk about rewards other than money. I want your opinion now. In a straight, I did virtually one Ruth by doing a comic book page. I don't know if you, I know you guys have seen that. And where, Little Lotta is redoing an old George Washington story. She's studying history for school, and she said, well, George Washington threw a silver coin across the Potomac, so she comes to the river and said, there's a river about the same size. She said, but I don't have a coin. So well, here's a pumpkin. And she says, I'll see if I can throw that across there and see if it can really be done. So then on the other side of the park, there's a picture of Ruth and I sitting on a park bench. And I'm saying to her, Ruthie, yeah, Ruthie says to me, Sid, I don't believe you love me. Was that it? And I said, Ruthie, if I don't love you, may the heavens fall on my head. And just about that time, a pumpkin splashed.
I've seen that.
But my question is, that's a residual thing that it wasn't money, but it got me a wife. But now, given the fact you know Ruth, was that a plus or minus?
I think it was a.
It was a little more than that comic book.
Oh, there was?
A lot more.
Oh, no. He wanted to lay it all to that.
Sid, did you start right in doing comic books?
No, I started in, on my own. I just tried to draw everything. But Pop, when I was maybe 6 years old, somebody would bring Sunday funnies home, and I'd lay them out and just copy them, and then I'd get my own ideas. And but then when I went to art school, I couldn't get into cartooning school of visual arts, because it was right after the war, and all GIs were going on in school, and GI Bill of Rights in the cartooning school, cartoonist and illustrator, was all filled up. So I had to go to a regular art school, and there we had life drawing classes, and the teachers seemed to think I was pretty good drawing girls, and one of them estimated that I would probably make my living drawing pretty girls on magazine covers. But then I went to cartooning school, which I really wanted to do. I mean, who cares about a beautiful girl? I mean, but anyway, went to cartooning school, and then the first job I got, though, was for this guy I mentioned, doing comic strips. I mean, a daily, and then a Sunday, and then after that, I got over to Harvey and did those. But I'll tell you, this is a whole different ball of wax, because they're cute little figures, whimsical, and without any detail to speak of. And then, boy, I really had to labor over this thing.
It's wonderful. It's absolutely charming.
Well, I didn't. I was supposed to be an illustrator. That's what I took up. But when I got out of school, I headed for California, and I worked in the cartoon studios there, and Disney and Warner Brothers and MGM. And I loved MGM. What I wanted to do was make movies. I didn't want to be a movie star or an actor. I didn't know enough to be one. But I wanted to do something with the movies. Mm-hmm. And so the drawing helped me get into the, same backgrounds and sets and things of that sort. And I never did stick to just being an animator. Now, I had a friend of mine, his name is, can't remember his name.
He's got a Gordie Little going here, I can tell.
What was the name of that picture? Strip you did, Gus Ariola.
Oh.
You know Gus?
Terrific stylized.
Well, Gus and I were real good friends at MGM. And he said he always wanted to do a strip. And I didn't want it. I wanted to get that. I wasn't interested in being an artist or cartoonist or anything. And I did do a few single pictures, single drawing pictures. But I was doing those for a magazine called Commentator. And then somebody come along one day and said, well, how come you do those cartoons for commentating? I said, well, they give me $7 or they get it for a cartoon. He said, well, you know, that's a communist magazine.
Oh, no.
So, boy, I said, I better drop that faster. My father would have killed me. And so, but then I really got into different things other than being an artist. And I just wondered how many people follow what they take up in art school.
Yeah. Well, so many people, first of all, just inherit something that their father did, and then, or they start out at some level, anything they can get, and then they get comfortable in that, and at least they're making a living, and then they don't really go after what's a little more hazardous, like a.
But you have, your work is a lot of humor in all of it, every bit of it. And that's a true comic strip artist, don't you think? It's
Well,
you're not like other people might draw something funny or cute or pretty, but it is not like a real comic strip artist. And I can see even in these things you did here, all those little inserts here.
Oh, yeah, I love
It
it.
has to be.
Great humor.
That humor is with you all the time, Sid.
well,
That's what I saw in him, was his humor,
Yeah.
his good nature. That was
I see it all the
his-
time in
his
everything.
personality.
Even though he's doing something serious,
That's right. And
you'll
his,
see the
his
humor. in it.
comebacks are really funny.
Yeah.
well, one of the things that I've always maintained was that if you had, well, I don't have a thing here, but anyway, to make something point up as being more humorous, and I've mentioned this in the show, where you have a champy and a ridiculous thing, and then to make it funnier, to point it up, the incongruity of having them surrounded by very realistic looking fish and birds and like that. And in a way, that's where the two, realism and humor, came together when I thought of doing Champy, and I got just doing Champy in my style. So then that's when I started thinking about how would a serious artist portray, like Monet and all those that I did this series of 12.
They were great.
And
they were
and,
wonderful.
but what I tried to get a humorous picture by using a serious point of view or method, according to Picasso. That's how that's both ways at once. But
That
anyway,
was great.
but anyway, I appreciate what you say, that humor, it can express itself in along with realism and at the same time.
Well, it's a pretty tough world that we live in, and the three of us, all of us in this room,
Have you ever
seen-
were you interested in art or anything, or just interested in the artist?
I was interested in music, if that's part
She's
of
a
art.
wonderful
Yes.
singer. She's
Yes,
a wonderful singer.
I do love art. I've taken
Yeah.
art lessons and done a few. I do photography.
A
but-
lot of photography lately.
But not too much drawing, huh?
No. I-
She can. She did a good portrait of me when we were first married. It was very credible.
Ooh, we should have put it in the
Someday,
comic
I think
books.
I will.
Well, you know what? This is an awful lot of fun. I have a feeling that we might be getting together another time. When I interviewed these guys for the very first time, I said there'll be more chapters, and there always are more chapters. And that's the good part of it, because people who watch this show get to see the story unfolding. And I hope we get a chance to sit at this table or some other table with chapter 2 of the Tom Tyler comic book or something else. And as long as Calvin's able to write the script, you guys can put it on paper, and I can always make my lips flap, because that's what I
That's
like.
what Gordie Little does.
just to spread the air around the room, the big noise from Winnetka here.
Be here next week. Will Tom Tyler vanquish Sid the Kid?
And
Is Sid the Kid really out of it, or just seeing polka dots?
and how high can Colorado bounce when he goes off the roof the next time?
Will Arto get his girlfriends back?
I hope so.
Oh God! And
All kinds of possibilities.
will the sheriff shoot himself twice in the left foot with 2 guns on the side? It's been an awful lot of fun. It's been terrific. I hope you, as a viewer out there, will pick up the gauntlet and carry it in terms of promoting the story of Tom Tyler, because he's a North Country boy. And even though this North Country son didn't come back, he did make a name for himself, and we're putting Witherby and Port Henry and such towns on the map as being the home of Tom Tyler, and doing some real good things in the process.
Well, wouldn't you
So-
say that he was as good as Hoppy and
In many
some
ways,
of those
in many
others?
ways better as far as
Yeah.
I'm concerned.
More athletic and
Yeah. So, you know,
pretty convincing.
and Calvin's the expert. If anybody needs some more information about Tom Tyler,
To classify him, he was as good as Hopalong Cassidy or any of those other fellows, wasn't he?
promoted differently.
Yeah, everything you read about him, they always say if he just had the breaks, he could have been a top caliber star in the mode of Hoppy, or
Yeah.
of course the two, probably outside of John Wayne, probably the two best known cowboys are the singing cowboys, Roy Rogers and Gene Autry, but he couldn't sing, so I took that one out. But I think given the right venue, he could have been up there, and you saw it when he did the Three Musketeers with the Republic Studios behind it. That, you know, those were just a cut above some of the others, but they were kind of at the end of their run too. He was in the last 13 chapters. There was 51 chapters altogether, and several people played Stony Brook, including John Wayne. But Tom Tyler was the last one.
Oh, anyway, we've made a lot of memories, and we've recovered a lot of memories. There's been at least a bushel and a half of nostalgia at this table here today, and I want to thank Sid Couchey and Arto Monaco and Ruthie back here for adding a whole new dimension to my life. It's fun to meet people like you and to call you my friends. It's just been a lot of fun.
Well, I want to thank you and Two Gun in Colorado for entering into this project. It's been a lot of fun for me, and I'm more than happy to work with Arto, and hope that we do some more stuff together.
One thing is the fact that Sid has control of us, because he can take that pen of his and he can make you a good guy, or he can make you no good.
Yeah, we have to be real good to him, and in spite of all of that, he'll put us in a very different light, I'm sure.
Yeah. Well, you probably want to edit this because it's not about cowboys, but that reminds me, Arto, of there's a feud between Al Cap and Ham Fisher. Al Cap did Little Abner, and Ham Fisher did Joe Palooka. But anyway, and they came to hate each other.
They did?
So Al Cap had the type of strip where he could put Ham Fisher in his strip and make it look like him, and made him a miserable thing. As a matter of fact, he called him Hamilton Fatback. And he was always running around chasing girls and around the desk and all that stuff. And of course, Fisher didn't have the type of strip that was a satire could get back at him. But so anyway, I'm in Al Cap's position right here.
I'll never forget the first time I ever saw Al Cap on television on the old Tonight Show. Probably when Jack Parr first took over the Jack Parr Show, what is now the Tonight Show, and he came on, and Jack Parr said to him, "What sets you apart?" You know, he meant what about your comic strip is better, you know? And he said, "Well, the thing that sets me apart is I only have one leg. I have a wooden prosthesis." He pulled his pants leg up, and he said, "I always thought I was better than any other kid in my block. Not because I had one leg, but I was the only kid in my neighborhood that could hold his socks up with a thumbtack." And that was my first introduction to Al Cap outside of that wonderful strip that he drew for so many years. Thank you all for being with us today. Thank you so much to the proprietors of the Comfort Inn in Plattsburgh for allowing us to use this room. We've made some memories here that are embedded in these walls, and maybe they'll rediscover them 1,000 years from now, who knows. In the meantime, thank you, Calvin, for your ideas for this comic book. It's It's a wonderful concept, and thank you for the memories you've given to me, all of you. And who knows where we're going to be next time for our little corner.